something that we should be paying attention to. Endangered species in India are now under threat. As per the 14th Conference of Parties of the COP14 United Nations Convention, the desertification and climate change in India is becoming a big threat for wildlife. A land or a forest declared desertified after it becomes completely infertile and can no longer support plants or trees or even a blade of grass. Zoologists say desertification has either caused long droughts, deforestation due to insensitive agricultural practices. India has already lost 30% of the land to deforestation, and it's impacted our wildlife as well. Species like the Asiatic cheetah, the pink-headed duck, and the Javan and the Sumatran rhino have been declared locally extinct within India. Our wildlife is under threat. I'm joined right now by the expert who tells us that this is a serious problem and how we should currently be looking at solving that problem. Praveen Bhargav is the Managing Trustee of the Wildlife Trust. Mr. Bhargav, good evening, and thank you for waiting patiently for us to come to the topic and for joining us this evening. There are several questions about what has caused the problem. There are some voices in India that have also said the cheetah, in fact, has been extinct for several decades now. Is there any reason to believe that things are worse today than they were maybe 20 years ago?
No, in fact, after the promulgation of the Wildlife Protection Act, things did look up and recover. Of course, we had lost the cheetah by then. But now what is happening is there's a very, very serious threat to wildlife because of, apart from hunting, due to loss or fragmentation of habitat. For instance, the cheetah was lost because we just did not focus on conserving our grassland ecosystems where these animals thrive. And all the grasslands have vanished. And reintroduction of the cheetah is being talked about. There's only one, a very small remnant population of Asiatic cheetahs in Iran. But Iran is not agreeing to give us any animals. So the idea is to bring something from Namibia or from Africa or wherever. So, but where is the habitat? Unless we focus on protecting our habitats, we cannot dream of reintroducing the cheetah, or for that matter, conserving species like the rhinoceros, which is almost reduced to a single population in the Northeast, or the lion. In fact, the conservationists have been constantly saying that the lion needs a second home, and a sanctuary was notified in Palpur, Kuno. And the Supreme Court also passed orders, but Gujarat refused to give lions to Madhya Pradesh. Both were ruled by the same political party at that time. So therefore, there is a serious crisis with respect to conservation of habitats. And there is a new law called as the Forest Rights Act. 72 lakh hectares have been given away as individual and community ownership. Development projects are ripping apart wildlife habitats. So apart from, let's keep all this thing about tiger numbers and all that aside, there is a serious problem. And grassland ecosystems where the Great Indian Bustard or, for example, the cheetah require such habitats, there is practically no focus on protecting them.
Well, Mr. Bhargav, what should we be doing at this time? Now, obviously, the pink-headed duck and the cheetah are gone, but there are other animals that we should be, that are critically endangered, like the Great Indian Bustard, for example, that we could be doing more to save. What should we be doing as a people, as a society right now?
Correct. Yeah. First of all, we need to really use good data and knowledge to drive policy. And it can't be a bureaucratic process. The second aspect is I happen to be on the Boundary Rationalization Committee of the Ministry. And this issue about Great Indian Bustards had come up before our committee. And there was an earlier committee headed by Dr. Savarkar. And that committee had recommended that the Great Indian Bustard Sanctuary in Maharashtra, which is was one of the strongholds of the Great Indian Bustard, had to be 1,220 odd square kilometers. Now this recommendation, after going through all various committee reports and so forth, our committee recommended that this be notified. And the Standing Committee of the National Board for Wildlife also accepted it, and the Supreme Court accepted it. But I'm not sure what has happened on the ground. Unless and until we notify Great Indian Bustard habitats as sanctuaries, and including, there is a very important thing when we talk of Great Indian Bustards, which is one, they have what are called as lekking sites, where the males gather and display. So these are extremely important and they need to be protected. And if there are a lot of inholdings of human settlements and so forth, some of it will have to be relocated outside, for which there is, we need knowledge as to where it should be done. And then there is another very big threat, Faye, that I would like to flag in your show, which is that the government is talking about this whole thing of giving 48,000 crores to states for afforestation. You know what is going to happen? There's a very, very great risk in that. These grassland habitats which should not be touched, people will go in, dig pits, buy polythene bags and plant saplings. This happened in Karnataka in a place called Ranibennur. They, without any imagination, planted eucalyptus and ruined that habitat. In several places, this kind of a tree planting thing, because everybody thinks planting a tree is the panacea for all our wildlife conservation or forest conservation problems. In fact, it causes even greater problem. The remedy is worse than the malady. So therefore, we need to be careful. We need to use good science, good data, find out where these animals have a reasonable chance of survival. I'm quite skeptical about the cheetah being reintroduced because we have other things on hand. We have a reasonable chance of securing lions for the future, the rhinoceros, and even tigers. The story is not complete. It's not as rosy as you think.
Mr. Bhargav, if I may just ask you this.
It can all be...
Yes, if I may just ask you this. There is a raging debate taking place in our country right now, across the country, in fact, about economics versus environment, about roads that are now being placed in tiger reserve land. We have in Mumbai, for example, the RA forest in which the government proposes to build a shed for the metro, which will cause more human beings to go into that space, which is currently home to leopards. We know that there will be a cement factory inside the tiger buffer zone in one part of Maharashtra. This is also a question in the Aravali forests outside of Delhi. Our forests are becoming spaces where we're allowing or we're encouraging more human beings to enter. We also have, from what we understand, 3 million human beings living inside of tiger zones in various parts of the country. If this continues, will we eventually drive these animals outside of those habitats? And can we ever make up for it by planting trees?
Certainly not. You flagged two issues, one with respect to development projects crash landing into wildlife habitats, and second about people inside protected areas. Now, as far as development is concerned, we need to be very, very careful. One of the strongest mechanisms that exists in law under the Wildlife Protection Act is the National Board for Wildlife, which is the highest statutory body which has to appraise projects before they enter. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is this committee, the Standing Committee of the National Board for Wildlife, has virtually been turned into a clearinghouse. The project clearance rates are in excess of 90%. And therefore, that is a very, very big threat to conservation. You mentioned roads, the linear intrusions are a major problem. And for example, other issues like there is uranium mining being proposed in the Nagarjun Sagar Sri Shailam Tiger Reserve. So some of it is site specific. And we need to really very carefully weigh, because I'll tell you, 4% of India is reserved for these endangered species. If we are not able to achieve economic progress and deliver social justice to people using 96% of India's landscape, there is something seriously wrong. So we need to very clearly focus on securing this 4%, and at the same time, we still can achieve our development objectives by smart ways of dealing with it. For example, we need to realign highways that cut through tiger reserve. We are not saying stop every highway, not at all. There are very, very good solutions for which you need good people on the standing committee of the national board. You can't have rubber stamps which are stamping every single project saying, oh, development. See, the environment minister is on record saying ease of doing business is important. That has become the main business of the Ministry of Environment. As I have said earlier, even a Ferrari needs good brakes. The brakes have failed or are failing. So we should not gloat over these tiger numbers or all that, because that methodology is still not absolutely correct. There are experts who have critiqued it already. So therefore, I would say that fragmentation of habitat is a very serious threat. You talked about people. Now, under this very big fund called CAMPA, and I appeared before the Parliamentary Standing Committee and argued, and thankfully they accepted one of my suggestions that that money must be used for voluntary resettlement of people from protected areas. It's a win-win solution for both people and wildlife. Unfortunately, the focus is not there. And everybody wants to dig a pit, buy a polythene bag to raise a sapling.
Right. Mr. Bhargav, thank you.
That's not going to secure our forests and wildlife.
Yes, Mr. Bhargav, thank you so much for speaking with us. And you've made some excellent points. And I believe this is really the thing that our audience needs to understand when we make these arguments to government. When government proposes economic and development in the form of mines or roads or factories inside of our forests, at the end of the day, like Mr. Bhargav pointed out, we have 96% of the land of our very, very vast country available for development for us. 4% that's set aside for these animals that are endangered, and that we have a moral and ethical responsibility to protect, because technically the sky, the land, the forest, the air belongs to both man and animal. We've shoved them into just 4%, and now we want to put our roads, our metro sheds, our factories in that 4%. There is no justice in that thought. And if we don't do something, it's not just hunting, it's the absolute ruin of habitat, the pollution of rivers, of land, the cutting down of trees, and the assumption that if it's a grassland, you can just turn it into farmland and it doesn't hurt anyone. These are the things that are hurting our wildlife. We must do more. We must be more vocal. If you're sitting at home right now feeling helpless of what could I possibly do to save the birds that are going extinct, remember that you can be more vocal. You can read more. You can keep yourself more informed. And you can raise questions of your respective state government when they propose to make these changes. I hope you will do so. Moving on to the state of our economy. Auto industries who are hoping for relief from high GST rates might be in for a deep disappointment. The GST Council meets now on the 20th of September, and sources have told the Times Network and our sister channel ET Now that multiple states, including Kerala, Punjab, Bihar, West Bengal, may completely oppose the GST rate cuts. Now, states believe that high taxation is not the reason for the crisis, and they're also looking to shore up their own revenues. Remember, GST revenues have been fairly poor this year. This comes at a time when multiple automakers, including Maruti, Mahindra & Mahindra and Hyundai, among others, have announced no production days, days in which they will just keep their factories closed. Now, the reason why this should be worrying is because when they keep their factories closed, factory workers don't get paid. And when they don't actually use their factories every day of the month, steel suffers, ancillary industry suffers. And of course, the money that they have borrowed from banks to build and set up that factory is going unutilized. The auto industry is facing its worst crisis in 20 years. Some argue the worst crisis it has seen in its entire life in India. Many companies have laid off contract workers, dealers, showrooms have now shut down. And then, of course, remember, if there's one showroom or one factory, there are those who are officially on paper and those who are unofficially on paper, people who provide food, transportation, any sort of other facilities to those employees are also suffering. The government's auto sector booster hasn't worked. However, it's not all gloom. Today on the economy front, data that has been released has shown that factory output for the month of July has actually picked up. Our total factory output has gone up 4.3% in July compared to 1.2% in June. And you'll remember that that number really worried us. So just to give you an example of how this is actually playing out, Mahindra & Mahindra has decided to hand out vehicles on a monthly subscription model instead of asking people to buy them. So 19,720 rupees a month could get you any of the above. The KUV 500, the XUV 300, the Scorpio, the TUV 300 and the new Elitras G4. Ashok Leyland has in fact announced 59 non-working days, and that's really worrying. And there have been layoffs across the board. But I must keep reminding our viewers, the slowdown that we're talking about and the layoffs are not limited at all to the auto industry. It could be happening across the board. We're hearing reports now of it actually hitting the services industries as well. Is the factory output information good news? Does this mean it's a turnaround? Or is there still reason to worry? Anand Gurumurthy for the BJP joins us right now along with Dr. Jayati Ghosh, Professor of Economics at JNU, Jagdish Khattar, founder of Carnation Autos, Professor Arun Kumar, who is a senior economist and a professor at JNU as well, and Professor Aman Agarwal, director of the Indian Institute of Finance. Professor Ghosh and gentlemen, good evening and thank you for joining us and thank you for giving us your time. I'm going to give everyone opening statements so you have enough time to speak. Ladies first, Professor Ghosh, do you believe that this number suggests a turnaround of some sort? If we've gone from 1.2% to 4.3%, does this mean we're bouncing back?
No, not really. This is actually just, this is the year on year from the previous year's equivalent month, and it doesn't really tell us very much. I would not see this as an indication of a recovery at all. I think the economy is still in the midst of a very grave crisis. And as you mentioned, it's not confined to the auto industry. It's quite widespread. It's across garments, textiles, a range of engineering goods, a range of white goods, and it's spreading not just to fast-moving consumer goods, but now also to service sectors. So I think we really have to see this as a generalized slowdown, which is reflecting the inadequate demand, and the government must step in and take macroeconomic measures for that demand to recover. I don't believe sectoral responses are the point at this stage. It's not going to help. And particularly in the auto sector, you should not take knee-jerk responses that conflict with your medium-term goals. If you want to move to an electric vehicle industry within a reasonable time frame, you have to recognize that that will be painful, that there is a transition. You have to prepare the industry for it. You have to provide subsidies. You have to prepare the infrastructure, like the plugging points and so on, to make sure that we have electric vehicles. You should be investing for a proper transition, not knee-jerk responses which simply say, okay, let's patch this up and somehow create demand for more combustion vehicles. So I believe that this is a generalized crisis. It requires a general macroeconomic response in terms of raising demand and through government spending, and that a sectoral response is not going to be enough, and sectoral responses should not conflict with medium-term goals.
Well, let me also bring in Mr. Jagdish Khattar. Mr. Khattar, you've had several conversations with us through the course of this, what we can call now a slowdown, and you've been very generous with your time. I want to understand from you, and we've had Maruti have to come out today and actually say millennials are not the cause. They're not even a small cause of this problem. In fact, buying patterns have not changed. Do you believe we're not able to actually see the problem, or we're not able to fix the problem? Because now information we're picking up from Ashok Leyland, from Mahindra & Mahindra, it should really worry us, shouldn't it?
Listen, it's quite evident now that it's not a sectoral problem. And the auto industry will go along with the other industries and other economy as a whole. So I agree with the previous expert who said that this is not a sectoral problem, it's an overall issue, and the government must be taking measures. You see, sometimes the government has to take small measures which they don't announce. So we really don't know what they are all doing it. But the point is that you cannot deal this sector-wise. It's an overall issue. And when you take decisions, you see, you have a rural area, you have urban area, you have, various sections. So you can't take section-wise. It's a general decisions would have to be taken, and auto will be a part of it. I'm very doubtful if you can take any specific decision for the auto industry.
Right. Statements from everyone else. Mr. Anand Gurumurthy is with us. He's with the BJP. Mr. Gurumurthy, again, Mr. Piyush Goyal, and I won't go into the Einstein-Newton problem. I think that might have just been human error. But I wanted to specifically talk about the fact that he mentioned, let's not look at the mathematics. At the end of the day, isn't economics and policy making fundamentally based on a foundation of mathematics? Why are we having WhatsApp level conversations, on government platforms, talking about millennials, talking about let's not look at the mathematics? At the end of the day, someone needs to communicate with industry and with citizens as to what's going on. What's going on, Mr. Gurumurthy?
See, let's be very clear in this, and actually speaking, whenever you are questioning, you are just questioning part of the statements. The speech will be for around 30-40 minutes, and if you're questioning only one part of the statement, it will be a flow of thought, and in that they would have mentioned something. So let us not go into the personal statements, as you said, of ministers, and let's understand this in the way Madam Ghosh explained. She explained it very clearly that it's not a sectoral problem, and the bigger picture what she will give us is like it is a problem that we are seeing in the entire world. So there is a problem in the automation, automobile sector, and this problem has set in with lot of other industries, especially in the automation. That things are coming up. Lot of factories are cutting down production is one of the things that you speak of. If you see in the last 10 years, lot of factories have introduced a lot of automation also. So these kinds of things, and also added with it, many people are denying it, and even in the social media we are telling that Ola, Uber is not the reason. But if you even research the data, Ola, Uber also has captured a lot of market, and people don't need a car. Absolutely, like it was at one point of time, if you can afford a car, yes, go for it. Now you can still, within the cities like Bengaluru, Mumbai, Delhi, you can still go around without having a car, by using Ola and Uber. So all these factors also we must give some, some prime time. You cannot just say that these are all not factors and we cannot just throw them away. So at the macro level, whatever figures we are seeing, in July, it's a little bit better. And we believe that, one of the things that we see, and Indian economy, when you see the Sensex, when you see other factors also, the spending is a lot during Dasra and Deepavali. And, during the festival seasons, the spending is a lot. Not only in sectors like automobile, even in the sectors like textile and other things. The spending happens in this time. So usually in our GST collections also we see a rise in these seasons. So these are all some of the things which we can further debate about, and we must still see the numbers. So it's not that the government is not attending to it or anything. The government is aware of things that is happening, and we are also seeing the pattern which is flowing out, and we are doing things that has to be done.
Okay, I just want to point out though to Mr. Gurumurthy that and I hope you're right, because I think that at this point, everyone in this country is going to hope with all their heart that the economy turns around over the festive season, because that's the only way several people will be able to keep their jobs. But the truth is that Onam has already happened in Kerala, that, Ganesh Puja has already taken place in Maharashtra, and we would have liked to see higher maybe consumer sentiment during those
numbers
festivals.
Are not at out, Faye. Those numbers,
yes, I said I hope.
Those numbers are not yet out. That's what happens. It starts from the Ganesha Puja and goes up to Christmas. So this is what happens. You can open up this thing and see, the charts, and see how the market behaves during these 4 months.
All right, Professor Arun Kumar, do you agree with Mr. Gurumurthy?
No, let's be clear, what does the data say? And there's a lot of confusion about data. The data that comes out is usually the organized sector data, especially like the 5% rate of growth for the quarter is actually completely organized sector data, and within that also a few hundred corporate sectors. So the unorganized sector data is not included in that. Similarly, the index of industrial production is largely the organized sector data. And the decline really started with the unorganized sector. And if you assume that unorganized sector is 45% of GDP, as the data seems to suggest, and it employs 94% of the workforce, then if 94% of the workforce lost incomes after demonetization, then GST, then the NBFC crisis, and the loans that they couldn't get, then, if that sector declines even by 10%, your rate of growth comes down to 0% or negative at the moment, rather than 5%. If the rate of growth was 5%, that's a very good rate of growth internationally and compared to our own economy. And at that rate, why should consumption decline? Why should investment rates stagnate? Something should be going up if the rate of growth is 5%. So the data is consistent only with a 0% rate of growth or a negative rate of growth in the economy, and the unorganized sector must be taken into account in the reckoning. Now the argument that sales will rise in Dussehra, Diwali and the festive season is coming, that happens every year. So if you compare with that, what the industry is worried about, and that's why the reports have come that industry is holding less stocks than last year. So it means it's producing less for the Diwali and Dussehra season because it expects the demand will be less than earlier. So the problem is really a demand problem, and the demand problem has got aggravated because the government came out with the incorrect figures for the budget, and therefore it lost revenues, and it's projected very high revenues again. And when it loses revenue, it has to cut back expenditures. When it cuts back expenditures, then the demand comes down further. So in the economy, you see that the private sector is not increasing its investment rate. The public sector is coming down in terms of its investment, and the consumption is coming down. So all the sources that could have been there for growth, those have slowed down. And let me also point out that this budget, the capital expenditure, including public sectors, 8.5 lakh crores, whereas last year it was 9.2 lakh crores. So that's already been cut back. So we needed to raise it further rather than cutting it back. So my suspicion is that the economy will keep on decelerating, and this 1 month of IIP doesn't represent the trend, and it doesn't definitely represent the unorganized sector's growth. So in other words, the government has to stop being in denial. Government has to accept that the problem is there, and the problem is deep. For 3 years, it has not accepted that, and that's why the problems got aggravated. If you cut GST, then it's going to increase the fiscal deficit further. If the fiscal deficit increases further, then you have to take a policy decision. How much fiscal deficit can you tolerate? So a lot of political decisions that have to be made.
In fact, Professor Kumar, and let me take this question to Professor Aman Agarwal of the Indian Institute of Finance. Now, here's the challenge, and this is quite a challenge. We must accept that the government and Ms. Nirmala Sitaraman are actually in a very, very difficult spot. Because on one hand, you have businesses like car businesses and car ancillary businesses who are saying, cut the taxes, cut the taxes. But if they were to cut GST and cut taxes, they wouldn't make enough revenue in order to spend and create jobs, because the solution that a lot of the economists are offering, including Professor Ghosh, who's on our panel, was that the government should actually spend a great deal and create jobs, build large bridges so that a lot of people are employed in those large bridges. You can't do this and you can't do that. You can't say yes and you can't say no. What would this government do, Professor Agarwal?
No, Faye, I think you've given them a good solution to the problem which you're talking about. Let us understand a few macroeconomic situations here. First of all, we have a huge amount of foreign exchange reserves, and reserves, as you understand, is created for the purpose of any kind of uncertainty, and we are not touching that as of now. Secondly, we have stuck ourselves to a very strong fiscal deficit target, which can be easily buffered in to almost 100 basis points at comfort zones even today. So the government has, it's a question now they need to take whether they're ready to take that 100 basis points jump in the fiscal deficit and go about doing what Dr. Ghosh was talking about. The third component is that there have been introduction of environmental based regulatory frameworks which have actually put the industry into a fix. A car, a vehicle in this country, in a country like India, a developing country, is not bought for 4 years, 10 years, 15 years, my dear friends. It is bought for life. 98% of the population of a country like India would buy it for life. And you're telling that population that you're only going to live with that car for 10 or 15 years, which is not a rule anywhere in the world on the name of environment. You're expected to be that. And then you want to immediately jump, and automobile industry, and Mr. Khattar can voice for it, which has been one of the most slow in terms of creating and moving from one segment to the other. I remember I drove a solar car way back in Switzerland, way back in 1983-84, which did not get into commercial vehicle. And I spoke with a lot of industrialists about 15-20 years back, and they said, when we are selling in technology which has been there for so many years, why do I need to go about inventing or designing a new wheel? Now this is where we are seeing that change which is happening, a disruption which is happening. The government has to take a call. GST, certainly what the people are voicing, certainly needs to be rationalized. That is not a question which needs to be there. But the question is, would it help at this scenario? I don't think it will help, because it is a mindset. Uber, Ola is another kind of a mindset, but that is not what is creating this disruption. What is creating this disruption is the life of that particular asset which I buy for life.
Yes.
And that is where the government needs to
while that's a fair
ease its
argument,
rules
yes, Professor Agarwal. At the end
that.
of the day, we must acknowledge the problem, like has been pointed out by the panel, is not specifically in the auto industry. It's right now across the board. I can tell you there are TV channels shutting down. In my career, I've never seen a TV channel completely shut down and go off air. People are laying off, large companies are laying off their employees completely without warning. Merlin is on the phone line from Goa, and our phone lines are open to you viewers to tell us what you are experiencing on the ground. Merlin, go ahead. All right, we'll try and get Merlin back on the phone line. Is there anyone else? All right. Rebuttals from our panelists. Mr. Khattar, do you have a rebuttal? Do you have an observation you'd like to put forward? Because this is what has been offered. We have forex reserves. We can reduce, or we can, sort of bridge our targets on fiscal deficit and improve the regulatory framework. Mr. Khattar.
Listen, I think the problem is quite evident. We have to create demand. Demand is not there. People are hesitant. They have uncertainties and all. Tinkering with excise and all that is not going to help. We need first of all, we need a confidence that yes, we will be able to tackle this problem. And this problem has to be tackled at various levels in various segments of this industry. We need a very comprehensive plan and a time period for that, because this is not going to be over in a short period. So we have experts. Let us accept, let's work it out, let's share with it, and do it with confidence. My only fear is that once you are in a problem, and if you create that the psyche of a problem, it becomes worse. We should get back into confidence. Things have not gone correctly, we can mend it, and these are the stages in which we will do, and let everyone come on board. So, I'm a great believer that no problem can be unresolved, it can be solved. We all come together and we put our weight behind it. I don't want to go into details. I think the issues are known, the problems are known, but we must get the confidence back to deal with it.
Phone line from Goa is back on the phone line. Go ahead, please. Good evening.
Yes. Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, Faye. Good evening, Faye. Hello? Yes. I have a lot of respect to all the panelists on the show.
Yes, go
Hello?
ahead. Yes.
Yes.
Step away from your television and go ahead. Yes.
Yes. So my problem is, I have a lot of respect for all the people who are there on the show. But my question is, I used to get rupees 10,000 on 1 lakh 4 years back. Today I'm getting only 6,700 rupees.
On a fixed deposit.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, for a fixed deposit, which I run my house. Second thing is, I have a child at home who is educated, but is not employed. So how do I spend the money when I don't have income? So this cars and all, I have respect to these people, but this is my question as a citizen. What do I do? Now what do I do? When I'm getting 10,000 rupees for 1 lakh, I was getting 4 years back. Today I'm getting only 6,700 rupees. How do I run my house? What do I do? It's the same thing for me. Like Faye, it is the question what you talk about biscuits. It's the question of biscuits. It's the question of buying biscuits, not cars. Okay.
Okay. Fair enough. That's a fair point. Kalidas on the phone line from Mumbai. Go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Kalidas here. I personally feel that we are a populated country and the top management should take a pay cut because major of the profits are going with them and the workers, the skilled workers are becoming jobless. So this is a typical scenario in all the sectors. Everybody just wants to grab the money.
Okay, that's a good point. Let me quickly take that point to Mr. Khattar because he's, I believe, on the panel the only real, representative of top management in manufacturing. Mr. Khattar, do you believe that it's time that the management of Ashok Leyland, Mahindra Mahindra, all of these companies take pay cuts in order to facilitate the flow, the shop flow?
I think there's got to be a corporate decision, let me put it this way. And, when we read that this person is getting so much of amount, the salary is only 10%. The balance is incentive given based on the performance of the company. So I think, once we get the whole figure, we feel that he's getting the whole thing as a salary. But the salary is only 10 part of it. The
your argument is nobody's getting incentives.
But I'm sure they would take that into account. So it all depends on incentive at the end of the year, and you may not find the same number and which you have seen in the past years.
All right, Professors Kumar and Ghosh, I will come to you. Professor Ghosh, you first. I want you to address what Merlin said on the phone. Not making as much money out of my fixed deposit interest. My daughter is unemployed. It's a question of how much money I can spend. Now, let's combine that with what Mr. Gurumurthy argued earlier. Will the festive season make a difference then? If this is what households are feeling, if they're counting every biscuit, what are they going to spend during Diwali and Christmas?
You see, I think that's the point. We are going through a macroeconomic downturn of fairly severe proportions. And the idea that you can solve this with a little bit of tinkering of excise or a little bit of an incentive there or something there, this is all nonsense. It will not happen. You have to go out there and create demand. The only way you can do it is through the government spending. And I will come back to what exactly that means in terms of the fiscal deficit in a minute. But on the issue, I think Merlin got it exactly. The reason they're not spending is because they don't have jobs. Their incomes are falling. And many workers, it's not just the ones who've been laid off today. We've had the unorganized sector facing deep, deep crisis now, ever since demonetization, barely recovered, and then they were hit by GST. We've had major livelihood losses, job losses, wage cuts. We've got manual workers getting half in money terms of what they were getting 3 years ago. Obviously, they will spend less. And that low spending has now finally come home to roost in terms of hitting the formal sector. So I think we have to recognize the source of the problem and say, well, then now we have to therefore cause demand to recover, cause employment to recover. And the only agency that can do that right now is public. It's the government that can spend at this point. On the issue, just a side point, on the issue of the management and so on, even if management doesn't take cuts, surely the companies that are laying off workers should not be giving very fat dividends on the profits, which has been happening. Many of the auto companies that are laying off workers have actually been giving fairly high dividends. And I think that part definitely deserves another look. But to get back to the issue of the fiscal deficit, you mentioned that it's impossible. The government is in this bind because it can neither actually give tax benefits nor can it exceed a fiscal deficit. See, the whole point is that you have to see an economy over a cycle. And the point about fiscal policy is that it must be counter-cyclical, that it must respond in a downswing by expanding. Because it's only the government, as I've mentioned before, that can actually do that additional spending. So you should not be worrying about a fiscal deficit at this point. Why do we worry about a fiscal deficit? Because we think it will be inflationary or it will cause a balance of payments deficit. Now, at this point, it is completely unlikely to be inflationary because we have so much excess capacity, so much unemployment, we don't have a supply bottleneck. So spending more right now is not going to generate inflation. Okay. Right, will it generate a balance of payments deficit? It may well do.
Yes.
But it's not going to be that serious, and we will be worse off.
I just have one question, Madam.
just one moment. I just want to take this question
we
also
have
to...
some senior panelists.
One second, Mr. Gurmurthy. I just want to take this question to Professor Kumar. Professor Kumar, I know you have a point to make, but I want to just ask you one more question so you could answer both. An hour ago, we had a conversation about the very hefty fines that are being levied in the new Motor Vehicles Act. Now, the problem here is that taxi drivers, auto drivers, truck drivers have turned around and said it's no longer viable for them to be drivers. The fine exceeds their monthly earnings. They would actually consider just... They will be forced to leave the vehicles at the traffic police and walk away. Again, is this policy that could hurt us in the medium term that perhaps the government hasn't fully considered?
So, you know, Faye, you're right. Policies that have been implemented in the last few years have often been knee-jerk. You know, they haven't been thought through as to what the consequences would be. And demonetization is a very good example. And the kind of fines that are being levied is also kind of an example where it hasn't been considered that, you know, the drivers, etc., what kind of income they earn and what kind of fines they can pay and how they can continue in this. So in a sense, I think what I was saying earlier, I'd again reiterate that the problems that began with the unorganized sector, rather than addressing the problem at the level of the employment in the unorganized sector and the incomes in the unorganized sector, we are now giving packages to the organized sector, you know, rather than to the unorganized sector where the problem really began. And if we don't address the unorganized sector problem, you know, whether it be the farmers, whether it be the people employed in the micro sector, the cottage sector, if we don't address those problems, I think we don't have a solution, because the problem will not be solved by, you know, the 6% of the workforce that's there in the organized sector. We have to cater to 94% which is there. And if we have a resource shortage and if we don't want to increase the fiscal deficit, then certainly we must start with the unorganized sector first. And even if we have more resources because we decide to raise the fiscal deficit, then too we must begin with the unorganized sector, and having satisfied there, then only come to the organized sector. There's another point that one of your questioners had raised about inequalities in society. And as the Oxfam report pointed out recently, that 9 people have more wealth than 700 million Indians have, you know. And that kind of distribution difference in wealth terms and in income terms, that is going up. And that's part of the problem of the shortage of demand. If at the lower levels your incomes are not rising enough, then the demand doesn't rise enough. And I'll remind you of what Ford said when the mass production of cars started. He said, my thing would succeed only if my workers can buy my car. That means my workers must have a higher salary, and then only will mass production work. So in India, if the share of income going to the poorest sections and the lower middle class keeps falling, then demand will be short beyond a point, and then we'll have to artificially boost demand through other means. And it's in this context that I'd like to point out that the government, instead of increasing capital expenditures, is cutting back and increasing expenditures, say, on the services, for instance, like education and health. It's not increasing. That's where you'd create a lot of employment. You'd also create a lot of employment in rural infrastructure.
Yes.
So you need to put a lot of resources there.
All right, and I'll ask our panelists to keep the answers shorter so we can give everybody an opportunity to quickly chime in with a suggestion. Mr. Gurmurthy, go ahead. You had a question.
Sure. So I'll just keep my answer very short.
Yes.
One of the things is, in the unorganized sector, for the afforestation program, around 45,000 crores across all states will be distributed. So government is pumping money into the unorganized sector in many sectors, you know, where there's a lot of crisis. Government is pumping money. Then other thing the economists are speaking is about, always, increase the fiscal deficit and, push money into sectors. These are not the sectors where the government is. It's a private player sector, and they are doing well, actually. The numbers, maybe for 1 or 2 consecutive months has come down or gone up. These things are happening. But the situation is not panicky. The reason is, if you go and increase the fiscal deficit, you have seen countries like United States of America funding from their future. They are funding from their futures and, funding and making their future generations poorer. So this is something which the economists keep suggesting. So maybe the suggestion is again a knee-jerk reaction, which maybe will be debated a little later. Because if we are understanding the sector, if we are understanding the sensitivity of the sector and doing I think that will be more better, and that's what the government is trying to do. We're trying to understand, and we are even requesting the industry to understand what is wrong. Because I want to just talk about one this thing that is coming out everywhere. The car, one company called as Kia and one more MG Hector, they are booked for an year. And here, on the other side, we are seeing some other cars not getting sold. So what may be the reason? What is the consumer mentality that these companies are addressing and those companies are not addressing? Or maybe people are looking for something new. So these are also things that are sensitive issues which the auto industry can take up. They are quite good at it. And they have done a lot in the past years, and they'll do in the future also, in the coming months.
Rebuttals from the experts on the panel? Anyone?
It applies to all the industry, a little bit more variety.
Professor Ghosh, go ahead.
You know, if you fail to understand the problem, how will you ever actually address it? This continuous denial of a macroeconomic slowdown, of the absence of aggregate demand, of a reduction in wage incomes, of a fall in employment, how long can you keep pretending that it's not there? And the longer you do it, the worse the problem becomes. Yes. For heaven's sake, recognize the problem and recognize that there are fairly standard macroeconomic solutions that all countries have employed. The longer you delay it, the more you will have to spend and the less effective it will be.
I know that Mr. Khattar has a point to make. I also want to ask you this, Mr. Khattar. At the end of the day, you know, corporate India reacts to comments coming in 1 second, Mr. Gurmurthy. We heard you out. At the end of the day, Mr. Khattar, corporate India reacts to comments coming in from government. Now, Mr. Goel, for example, today said, don't look at the mathematics, don't look at the calculation of how we'll get there. We should just work really hard. I mean, that suggests that corporate India was not working really hard until he suggested it, or he came up with that suggestion saying this is a solution to our problem. So on some level, maybe there's a mismatch between the understanding in government and the communication that's coming out of there.
See, my request and suggestion would be that, you know, everyone is giving his views. There are problems are there. The solutions are also known. There's time that we stop having debates of this nature. Small group sits down together and they work out the next 2-3 year plan. And in that, they should include every possible views that can be there. We need a concrete plan very quickly for the next couple of years. It's not going to be over within a short period, but if we have a plan and we are committed to it and we work on it, we'll be able to get out of it. There's no point, you know, debating that this is possible, that's not being done. Yes, there is a problem. It's not that this problem cannot be overcome. Let some experts sit down together, and it's not going to take more than a couple of weeks to prepare a blueprint. Let's all accept that and work on it. Otherwise, you know, every day we are discussing these things and we won't move forward. Solutions are known. Let's agree on it and then move forward with it.
That's fair. In fact, if the government of India so desires, I'll have my colleague Ragini, who's very young, who's managed to put this panel together today. I'll have her assist the government of India in putting together a panel of experts who can give a suggestion, because obviously they haven't done it themselves. I'll give a word to Professor Agarwal. Professor Agarwal?
No, this is a very wrong statement, Faye. This is a very wrong statement.
You see,
Government of India is at it, and we continuously monitor. As a government, it continuously monitors things at the government level, and they are also concerned about the people. It's an elected government, Faye. You can just give a statement that Government India doesn't have any kind of, you know, panel or anything. Please.
Okay, but there's no evidence on the ground of that panel's suggestion. Professor Agarwal, go ahead.
Oh, come on.
Yes, I was saying that, you see, to go about saying that there are no actions being taken, the very fact for the last 4 to 5 weeks, we are seeing, you know, statements coming out of cabinet ministers which show a kind of concern, the kind of questions, the kind of debates they are raising, the kind of interactions they are doing, clearly shows that there is a concern which is there in the government about this particular issue, whether it is the auto sector or any other sector, as a matter of fact. The only thing is that they want to keep certain parameters in check, and they want to resolve this problem without disturbing those factors, which is not expected to happen. Let us understand about 40 to 50% of the official jobs within the government machinery have not been filled up in the last 2 to 3 years. Now, if you do not fill up jobs, how are people going to spend that money? And the people who are supposed to be hired from within the organization or from outside needs to be there. So it is like the lady just told, you see, Goa's economy per se doesn't work on a government machinery. It works on a tourism and more of an entrepreneurial business which is there. So there needs to be prospects. If you need to boost tourism, the government needs to come forward in terms of helping boosting tourism. If it's a question of spending money which is required when there is troubled times, then the government needs to come out with solutions, whether it is fiscal deficit or not, to keep the thing moving. If there is some problem at a certain stage, the government needs to come out with requisite solutions to take for at least for that period of time. Maybe they may resort to...
Okay, I give 30 seconds to Professor Kumar, who's had his hand up this entire time. All right, Professor Kumar, 30 seconds. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so very quickly, you know, when Mr. Gurumurthy says that some cars are selling but some others are not selling, that's included in the fact that the decline last year's and this year is 30%, you know. So the comparison shows it includes whatever is selling more and whatever is selling less. So on the aggregate, the demand is down. That's the point number one that I want to make. Second is official jobs. Again, we're talking about the organized sector. CMI data shows that, you know, 45 crore was the workforce last year and it's come down to 41 crores. So 4 crore jobs is what we're talking about. We're not talking about lakhs of jobs, but crores of jobs having come down. So that's really the problem of demand. And the third point that I want to say is, why do we need to continue to discuss this is because government has been in denial, whether on demonetization or on GST structural faults. So therefore, there's a need for discussion to take place, even outside the government, you know, because the government may have a set of people who agree with each other rather than having, voices that are differing from them, whereas the voices that are differing from them are the ones that have pointed to what the problem is. So we need to continue to have dialogue outside as well.
Yes, I want to thank the panel for being very kind and giving us your time. You've been very generous over the last 1.5 years since we began discussing the economic, what we believe is the economic crisis. Just to answer the point that Mr. Khattar raised of why are we having these conversations night after night, Mr. Khattar, I believe that the economy affects every last Indian citizen, whether they're aware of how it's affecting them or not. Which is why I believe that of everything that's happening in the country at this point, of all of the arguments that people are having with each other, information on what the government is doing, on what the problems are, on what we're facing, is of paramount importance. These conversations are being held to allow my audience to have every angle of the story, to have every opinion of every expert. That's the reason why we have these conversations night after night. Also, when we have a government and various union cabinet ministers who make statements night after night that need to be examined and tested with data, that need to be examined and tested against research reports, we have to have these conversations so our audience is able to understand what is really going on. We will continue to have these conversations night after night because I do believe that jobs, the economy, and consumer demand is what affects the way we live our lives day in and day out. It is information that you are entitled to. Well, news is just coming in right now of a truck driver who was arrested for the death of the 23-year-old student in Chennai who was crushed by the truck earlier today. Now, this after the woman lost her balance on a scooter after an illegal banner fell on her. The truck driver has been arrested under a section of culpable homicide, not amounting to murder. Now, this is where the hypocrisy is. It wasn't the truck driver's fault. The biker, the woman on the two-wheeler, lost her balance near his truck. And it wasn't the woman's fault because an illegal banner put up by the AIADMK ruling government fell on her while she was riding her bike. But is there any sort of accountability for the person who put up the banner? No, there isn't. It is always the poorest that get targeted. Do we have Pramod on the phone line on this story? We will try and bring... Yes, Pramod is on the phone line. Pramod, what can you tell us about this? Was it the truck driver's fault? Why have the police arrested the truck driver?
Well, we did investigate and we spoke to certain eyewitness, and they very clearly mentioned that the truck driver was on the left side of Subhashree, and what exactly happened was that as she was driving on this particular 200 radial road, this particular banner actually fell on her head and she lost balance. It was an absolute shock for her, and even before she could retain her balance, she slipped and that's when she hit with the truck driver. And the eyewitnesses claimed that the driver applied the brake on time, but he could not control it because it was not the front wheel, but here the back wheel. This is where the Subhashri was caught, and unfortunately she passed away. But he has been booked under charges IPC section 279, 337, and 304. That is rash driving, putting someone, a person's personal safety under threat, and murder by accident. Apparently, it is a routine for the cops to arrest a person as one person has lost their life, but unfortunately, no investigation has been so far initiated about the person who has kept the banner there.
Right, Pramod, thank you for bringing us that information, and we'll continue to keep a close track on that story. Moving on to one international story that we want to bring to you.